Welcome to Let's Get Writing. I'm Catherine Mousseau, and this is a program that I created to interest people in the possibility of writing a book and allowing them the opportunity to find out what kinds of things go into writing a book, how do you edit it, how do you bring it to publication, and hopefully some of those answers will be provided through the guests I interview. And today I'm really thrilled to have, I think, my youngest guest, or close to it, Jordan Maloney, 24-year-old author.
Yep.
Welcome to Let's Get Writing, Jordan.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and this is your book here in front of us. It's called Stormbringer.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about how this came about.
Yeah, so I started writing this book in 2016, and it's kind of loosely based on my own life and my own experiences, but there is a very fantasy-like element in the book as well. But the main character's name's Adam Wake, and everything he feels and a lot of his backstory is pretty well word for word from my own real-life backstory.
So I'm going to call you Adam.
Yeah, no, it's fine. You can if you want.
When you said that. But Jordan, that kind of writing is sometimes hard to do. It's personal, and you're putting it out there for people to read in a very public way. So how did you find that?
A lot of writing for Adam was not fun at all. In any way, not fun at all for Adam Wake. It made me really, like at the time I was struggling myself with a lot of depression and anxiety. So that's what he suffers from in the book as well. So when you really have to sit there and analyze the way you feel and then put it into words for Adam to feel in the book, that can be a little taxing on you. So in order to balance that, basically there's a lot of other characters in the book. The book is told from excuse me, like 4 or 5, maybe 6 different perspectives, and 5 of them are really just my imagination. But Adam is very real. So in order to balance that, I would have a little fun elsewhere in the book. Like I didn't write Adam's story the whole way through in one go or in one block of time, because that would be just unfun, right? So I would write Adam, and then I would write Riley or Cicero or someone like that, and then I would come back to him after I get a new, fresh approach for him. So that was how I balanced that for the book. Yeah,
and that's a lot to keep track of. When you have different characters and you have their different motivations, you have different things that mean certain things to them. I mean, it's not easy to always interweave. I think it can be a challenge. How did you keep up with all that?
It's very, very challenging. I try to keep the timeline pretty consistent all the way through. Like if Adam's chapter is coming up, let's just say his chapter ends at 8 o'clock on a Friday. That's when his chapter ends. Then you would hopefully, and most of the time this is how it would work, he would hopefully pick up at like 8:05 with Riley. You know what I mean? So that way the timeline, it never really gets jumbled.
I have to agree with you. Reading the book, and you moved from fantasy to reality, had some very different characters. I thought you did keep that really, really clear, which is quite an accomplishment.
Thank you. And I mean, the only time I really stray from that is like at the end of the book, where everything's coming to a huge climax, where maybe it's not picked up minute to minute, but it's told, the same event is kind of told from different perspectives. And I feel like that really, when the reader realizes what they're reading at the end, they realize what's coming because it just happened in the other chapter, but now it's happening to this character as well. I think that can be a great moment for the reader. And like you said about the fantasy elements, it takes place in a place called the Blistering Isle, which was easily my favorite part of the entire process. It was just fun. I'm a huge fantasy fan. Brandon Sanderson, George R.R. Martin. I think they're great. I like to try to model my writing as best I can. I know those guys are world-class talent, and sometimes I'll read Brandon Sanderson and then just get frustrated because I'll start comparing it to my work, and I'm like, man, I'm just not quite right there yet. But by far, the fantasy element of the book is, I think, in imagery, and I guess metaphorically, is easily possibly the strongest portions of the book. For me, just maybe I'm biased because it was more fun to write. But
well, sometimes when you are writing things, then it's easier to write when you're really engaged with it. The personal parts, no doubt, are harder to write, and I think a lot of authors would agree with you on that, which is interesting. Maybe by bringing that in, it helped you balance it out.
It helped me in like my life. To put things in perspective. There's no doubt that this book really, when I sat down to try and finish it, was maybe step 2 or 3 to me really becoming, I guess, a little bit better with my own issues. I flew to Vancouver, and that's where I stayed in a place called Chilliwack, and that was really where I got the inspiration to write the Blistering Isle, because there was no Blistering Isle for like the first half of the book.
Okay.
Right, so that was where I really gained a little bit of inspiration for that, and I just felt like the book needed a more, I shouldn't say lighter, because the things that happen on the Blistering Isle,
no, they're not exactly.
They're not exactly light. They could be even more heavier than what happens in fictional Grand Falls, Windsor. So, but I just needed something to help balance out the real and the fantasy of the book.
Yeah. Well, and so I mean, going to BC, was it part of a plan, or that just flowed for you?
Yeah, no, it was part of. The plan wasn't necessarily to go there for the book. The plan was to go there to try to like gain a perspective, like a life perspective, you know what I mean? And then once I got there, for about a month or 2 before I went, I was heavily into writing the book. So once I got there, then basically my whole mindset was on, I want to get this book finished, and I gained a little bit of insight from different things. I learned more about plants and such that I had no idea existed, and then I incorporated those into the Blistering Isle and such like that. So yeah, it was basically, I didn't go up there for the plan of writing the book, but it just so happened that it all worked quite perfectly to be there and to help write the book. Right?
Well, it was a relatively short period of time when you think of it to write a book, so it had to take some intense concentration.
Yeah.
What's your day like when you're writing? How do you set up a good writing day?
Yeah, the first thing I like to, and this is with me involved in any type of work, and I would assume a lot of people are like this, where if you know when you wake up you want to get something done, you have a piece of work you want to do, you want to get that done, and you want to start it immediately. That's how I am anyway. So a lot of days it was like, I need 2 workable pages. I want 2 concrete final copies of 2 pages, and then after that everything else is gravy and I can go on and live my life type thing. So that was the goal. Every day 2 pages. And once you do that, it comes together pretty fast, but you don't want to do too fast, because after you write a few pages and then you lie down, you go to sleep at night, well then there's more ideas coming, and then sometimes you write too much, well now you have to go back 3 pages and put in this thing that you just thought of that was way better than what you actually had written. Yeah. So it's never good to write too much, but you need to find that, again, everything's a balance.
It's part of the subconscious process to some degree. When you say, you go to bed, you get up, and many writers write a certain amount, and then the next day the first thing they do, get up and read it, edit,
review it. Yep.
that type of thing, because it really is hard to get it exactly right the first time. I mean, it's a process, and it's a painful process.
It is.
Sometimes when you have to throw out things that you thought were great.
Yeah, and to me personally, at some point, if you're out there and you're writing a book, at some point you just have to let it go. You just have to take the book and push it out there, because if not, there's always something you're going to want to change. There's always something you can add, something you can take away that you think will make it better, and you're just running in circles. At some point, you have to just accept the work that you've put into your book and just let people read it and hopefully gain a little bit of feedback.
That's interesting, because that is a hard thing to do. It's almost like it's your baby.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I don't want to send it out to the world. It's just not quite ready. I've heard that before. Yep. I felt it myself. And, it's kind of a tough thing to do, but I think you're right. Get it out there. It's one book.
Yeah.
And from the sounds of the way your book ends, I think there's going to be more than one book. What's in your mind?
The hope is for Stormbringer to be a trilogy, as well as to have a prequel book that is set roughly 150, 200 years previous to the events of Stormbringer on the Blistering Isle. So 4 books in total. I just think there's a lot. There's just a ton of backstory for the Blistering Isle specifically, and then Adam's story is just nowhere near done. I think it would be disingenuous to have a 17, 18-year-old student who has severe anxiety and depression, and then you fix all of that in the span of 3 months. I just don't think that's real, and I kind of pride myself on most things in the book being real, and even though the Blistering Isle is completely made up, the things that happen there are still brutal, and they do happen on our planet. in our world. So they're real in that sense, even though the events are made up. It's very, very real, and it could touch a few people.
It definitely could. And you say, in kind of making things up, but at the same time, it's loosely based on the town.
Yeah.
So how did you go about that? Was that harder to do? I mean, you came up with names, and the minute I heard the name, I'm like, oh, I know that building. I know where that is. I could visualize because we live here.
Yeah.
How did you come to terms with figuring all that out, and what made it comfortable for you?
Yeah. So basically, it takes place mainly in Grand Falls, Windsor, and I did not change the name of the town because clearly anybody who reads it knows it's Grand Falls, Windsor. But a lot of the buildings and places, I kind of just barely touched up the name a little, because there are things that happen at these places that necessarily did not happen in real life, and I didn't want it to be confused. And I wanted to be able to do with these buildings as the story needed. So if you were going to take an actual building and then something were to happen there that's horrible, I don't think that's necessarily right. So I wanted to change things up just a little bit, so to give me the freedom to do whatever I wanted with the town,
Yeah, I mean, I wrestled with that with one manuscript that I had of kind of loosely basing it in Halifax and what to call it and so on. And I wasn't sure. I said, well, what are the guidelines? When can you actually use the name of a town, and what liberties can you take in writing? Those were questions I had.
Yeah.
And similar to what you've done here in this book. But I think it's an intriguing read for sure. When did you work from an outline at all, or it sounds like it happened more organically?
Yeah, there was a beginning and an end for Adam for the first book, and there's a beginning and an end for mostly all characters over the course of hopefully 3 books. I know where I want to go, and of course, as you write, things change. They just always do. But no, it was definitely organic, where, like I said before, the blisteringology simply didn't exist, and it just came very organically. Basically, Riley's story was just, I wanted something very real for a young girl to be able to read and maybe relate to, and I feel like I've managed to at least accomplish that a little bit in the book.
I think you have. Yeah, I definitely think you have.
It all came together, like you said, quite organically,
Yeah. So did you think of yourself as a writer? I'm going to ask this because, I mean, you're 24, so it's really great to see you out there doing this. Coming out of high school and so on, did you have this ideal for yourself, or where did it come from?
Yeah, my life never, I guess we all have our own dreams and stuff, and things never ever go the way you plan them out in your head, I don't think. But coming out of high school, writing was never on my mind. The only time I ever wrote anything were scripts for magic shows. What I was going to say at a magic show. I did magic for basically my entire adolescent life pretty well, and then the anxiety and depression came on, and that kind of forced me off the stage, and now I'm back doing magic. I have a big show coming up at the Classic Theater on June 11th, so I'm full-fledged back at magic. But no, I did not anticipate this, and I don't think I would have if my life would have went the way I wanted it to back then. I don't think I would have had the story to tell.
Yeah, maybe not, and maybe it was a form of therapy.
Yeah,
it definitely alluded to that. So, and it's very nice. I'm glad you mentioned the magic. I wanted to bring that to the table as well, because I think that kind of feel for magic comes out in your book. Yep. The fantasy side of it and so on. That there's something there for sure. Yeah,
there's I guess we'll call them magic powers that some of the Stormbringers possess, and that was definitely. Some of the, way back when, I wanted Stormbringer to be a comic book, to which Adam Wake would have been very magician-like. His superhero costume would have been like he was dressed up as a magician type thing. But it went in a different direction from there. But the powers of the Stormbringer are very, very, I guess, closely related to what I would view as a magic power, and that is just because I love magic, right, in my own personal life, and have since I was a kid.
That's very, very neat. And actually, when you mentioned that, the whole power and the comic book concept, when I was reading it, I could actually see that. I thought this is almost could be a comic book.
Yeah.
I mean, I still think it's something you could do with it.
Yeah, I'm open to it for sure.
Yeah. Well, talking about the format that it's in, how did you come? You're also an ebook, And
Yep.
then this book is available. Where is this book available?
You can get this book right now at Shoppers Drug Mart in Grand Falls, Windsor.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And also available online.
Yep, and you
Yep.
can just go on Amazon and download the ebook. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, I believe it's still free to view.
Yeah, many of us avid readers definitely have Kindle
Yeah,
Unlimited.
so just give it a look.
So when you were going about this, obviously you self-published. How much of that did you ever consider any other options?
Yeah, I tried, and I'm still completely open to, and personally would really prefer to have it published by a local, I guess, publisher on the island. I think it would totally make sense because it is, St. John's is in the book, Grand Falls is in the book. I think it makes total sense to have it published by a Newfoundland publisher. But no, Amazon was the way that I went. And because I guess Amazon is very friendly to self-published authors. It's not easy to get the book up there, but the steps are there if you want to take them and want to put the work in to get your book published through there, as long as it's formatted. Yeah, correctly.
It's all there. Step 8.
Yeah.
But like you say, it can be a little bit daunting when you.
I mean, I've said this to many people. The editing process, the formatting, and the publishing, for a brief time, completely drained me of my will to want to write anything. Mm-hmm. It can be that frustrating. Yeah. Right. So.
Be nice to pass it over to someone.
Of course.
But in saying that, I've spoken to many people as well who have gone with more traditional publishers. There's still a lot. You're still working
Yep.
with an editor. You're still revising. You still have. There's always that part. That's the work of the book.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to, as I say, make it a joyful experience, it still becomes a work.
Yeah, of course.
And that part of it is there. But perhaps, I think that with e-publishing, it makes it so available to people. So many more people are conceiving the idea of writing
Yep.
and actually getting it out there. Have you done anything in particular to market the book?
Mainly I've been marketing in Grand Falls. Mm-hmm. I do have a few friends from the United States who have bought and read the book, which I think is cool, just to know that people in another country are kind of reading your work. As for marketing, I'm not exactly great at marketing. Basically, every copy we've sold has either been from like Facebook or word of mouth. Usually, one person will tell, "Oh, I read this book. You have to read this book," and then they'll come to me and they'll want a book. Mm-hmm. For the longest time that the book was published, you couldn't. The only way you could get a physical copy was like from me directly. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a store to place them in, and luckily enough, probably like a month or so ago, I managed to get the book in the Shoppers Drug Mart. So yeah,
that's a good accomplishment.
Thank you. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. So you mentioned Facebook. So how much a part of that is of your marketing? Do you have a Facebook page particularly for this book, or a website, or what do you have?
Not for the book in particular. I just basically do all of my magic and writing and everything like that through my own personal Facebook, because I don't put anything on there that's really personal. It is kind of like a professional Facebook anyways. So yeah, that's basically, I think, our first order of books, we sold them all. I didn't even, at that time, I was still on two minds of I wanted to write it under a pen name and just completely, I didn't, you know what I mean? I was still a little bit scared of what people were going to think, and I was ashamed of certain ways that I felt at the time, and I wanted to write it under a pen name, but I figured, why hide? It was time. I didn't want to hide anymore. And if I could attach my name to this book and it would end up maybe helping even one person, then that would totally be worth it. But even when we got the first batch of books, I didn't say anything to anybody. My mom was just really excited and proud that I wrote a book, and she took a picture of the book and she put it up on her Facebook, and we ended up selling the entire first run of the book that way. And I didn't even admit that I wrote it basically at that point. So.
Well, would you felt peer pressure? You're still living here. You're young. You've gone through, as you said, a lot with anxiety and depression. Yep. Did you feel really vulnerable?
Yeah, people I went to high school with and such, they could read some parts of this and go, "Oh yeah, I remember that. That totally happened." You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it can be a little bit strange in that regard, but it's just the truth, and sometimes you just have to put the truth out there. And like I said before, writing this and being honest with myself has helped me so much in my personal life. So I don't regret anything I've said or anything personal that I've put out there at all. So.
And before we drift by this, what is your Facebook page? Because people watching may want to.
Yeah, you can just search me up. It's just Jordan Maloney, just my name, and I'm sure I'll be the. There's not many of us Jordan Maloney's around, so you can find me on there.
They'll find you, and they can probably search Stormbringer.
Just search it on Google or on Amazon, or head on over to Shoppers.
There you go. And what about pricing your book? How did you go about that?
Yeah, I wanted to price the book as low as I really could. Like, I didn't want to, like, you see some books and they're like 30, 35, 40. Like, they can get up there, certain books. I wanted to price it as competitively, like, basically I just wanted as many people to read it as possible, right? But it does cost money to get the books printed. So you need to at least not lose any money when you sell the book. So that's why I think ebook is great as well. I think the ebook right now is $10, you know? And these are available at Shoppers for $25. So I think those are very competitive, and it is what you would normally spend on a book of that type. Other than mass market published books, where a million of them are out there.
That's what I mean.
Cheaper.
That's what you say, of that type, because it's a small print run.
Yes.
The price has to be higher, and I think this is one of the things you've touched on here, is what authors, self-published authors, come across, how to make their book affordable. Because if someone's walking in and they want to buy the deal, and there are books at some of the larger retailers that are out there for a deal, I mean, you can't match that pricing.
No, you can't. A lot of them are $10, $12, right?
Yeah.
And when you spend $25, you want to know or hope that you're going to enjoy the $25 you spent. So it can be challenging in that regard to get people to buy it. Yeah, for sure.
But I like to think that people will support local authors, and I mean, I think I spoke to one author who said, my family complained about the price of my book and didn't want to support it. I'm thinking, like, well, maybe time for a new family.
Time for a new family, yeah.
But I mean, the reality of it is, you're not going to, as an independent, get that out there on the shelf for $8.
No,
I mean,
it's impossible to do.
It's impossible to do, and I even think with some of our Newfoundland publishers, that'd probably be tricky as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the books that are published by Newfoundland publishers, they're not less than $20. Not less than $20. So it is competitively priced as well, even still.
Yeah, no, it's good. I think you've done a great job with that. Now, what advice do you have for someone out there thinking to write a book, or anything you could share?
Yeah, for sure. You just don't know what you're capable of until you have to do it, or until you do it. You just don't. When I started to write a book, part of me thought, I can't do this. This is stupid. Why am I even trying to do this? But you get in there, and then after the first few pages, you realize that the story it's just coming together. So if you're thinking of writing a book and you have an idea, the only thing that you can do is just put, the words on paper and try. That's really all you can do, and I promise you will surprise yourself at what you're capable of doing with it.
Good advice, and I think a common piece of advice as well, a common thread that I'm seeing. Just start. Don't worry about what it's like, and once you have something to work with, it's so much easier. Yeah. How about anything that you might do differently? Anything
that I do different from other people?
Or if you for your next book, you said it's part of a trilogy. Is there anything you do differently approaching that?
I would like to pre-plan it a little bit better, and I've been planning the trilogy and the prequel book for a very, very long time. So going into this, I know certain things a lot better, and because I've spent a year or two with the characters, I know how they feel and how they should act. So whereas before, when you were writing the first book, halfway through, when you're writing for a character, you have to ask yourself, well, does this make sense that this character would react this way? Whereas now for the second and third book, I feel like that'll just be completely, of course they'd act this way, because now you know them. So I would plan a little bit better, and then the editing process, I would ask for more help with the editing process, because that can be a little bit daunting to see that staring down at you at the end. So for sure, those two things. Yeah.
Those two things. Yeah, and the editing process, how did you approach that? I mean, you said you did your own editing.
Yeah.
Did you send it? You didn't have anyone else?
Yeah, I had family members. That was basically it, family members and friends. So I would read it a few times. Like after everything I wrote, I would read. And then when it was all done, I would read it and read it and read it. And then eventually I would send it to like my mom and some friends, and then they would help me. We actually had a book printed and sent, because I wanted one just to see what it looked like. And we opened the book after at least 15 times running through it. On like the third page, the most glaring typo you could ever see. And we missed that literally 15 times. And it was because the dog in the book is based on my real dog. And I called him by his real name, which all of us were like, yeah, totally that's his name. Of course that's his name. And none of it registered in our mind that that was wrong. So after that, once I actually had a physical copy of the book, I think I sat there when I got that for at least 8 or 10 hours straight and was like, I need to make sure at least that everybody's name is correct. And I think at this point it's very close to where it needs to be for sure.
Yeah, and the editing process is a huge challenge. And I do think there's something between seeing it on the screen and holding it in your hands. So the idea to actually order yourself a copy and sit down with it, it's very hard as a writer sometimes to look at a screen and visualize your book. How thick is it going to be? What size am I going to choose? And so on, and to actually hold it. And if you ordered several copies and then opened it up,
and then that'd be bad.
That'd be heartbreaking.
Yeah, it would be.
Maybe the idea of ordering an early copy.
That's a good piece of advice.
Is a really good piece of advice
for a self-published office. Order one and like it yourself, and then after that, start selling. For sure. Yeah,
well, Jordan, I really do want to thank you for taking the time to come in and talk to us about your book. I think you shared some great advice with people.
Thank you.
And I've really enjoyed tapping into your process and into your thoughts.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so let's get you working on those other books so we can have the whole series out there and bring you back again.
For sure, I appreciate that.
And we'll remind everyone again out there watching this. If you've got an idea, we want you to get writing.
Yes.
Let's get writing. It's what it's all about.
Yeah, and if I could mention again, of course, it's available at Shoppers and on Amazon. And I'll be selling them as well on June 11th at the Classic Theater for the Magic Show. If you like magic.
If you like magic, check out Jordan.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.